No more lonely nights with a restless heart. Roll the dice, make a brand new start. When the world you knew got shattered, you and me were all that mattered. Just one way, I'm gonna lose this restless heart, running away with you. Welcome back to StillerBros at the Movies, where I think that was the most obscure song I've ever done at the beginning of one of these. Anyway, today we are covering a movie that apparently a lot of people didn't know was happening, but it seems like it's still a big-time blockbuster, The Running Man.
So, about 8 years ago, Edgar Wright posted a little something on Twitter when a fan asked him, what IP would you want to touch? What thing would you want to remake? His response was immediately just The Running Man.
The Running Man is a novel written by Stephen King under the pen name that he had originally used when he wanted to see if he was talented enough to write a novel without his name attached to it and see if it could become a bestseller. He did that multiple times, including on the other Stephen King novel that became a hit movie this year.
Yeah. Then about 5 years after publication, the book was picked up and then turned into a somewhat remembered Arnold Schwarzenegger movie from the 80s.
And now we find ourselves in 87.
So, can't go 3 for 3 this time.
Yep.
But, yeah, 1987 we are at peak cheese of Arnold.
We're at the point where Schwarzenegger's done enough movies where people are just like, okay, we understand what the appeal is. Cheesy lines, over-the-top action, characters that barely qualify as more than a cartoon character, all delivered through the can this guy even actually act delivery of a classic Schwarzenegger performance.
And like a lot of Stephen King adaptations in the 80s, it was not very true to the book.
Yeah, it seemed like they were more going for the basic premise and not an actual beat-for-beat run at the book. Run.
And so, obviously, Edgar Wright, who is a huge fan of the book, wanted to do a true adaptation of the book.
And so, now here we are, 2025, The Running Man.
Which it had to be this year because the book was set in 2025.
But it's also just kind of a big movie for the fact that this is a reunion between Edgar Wright and a few key creative forces behind one of his most beloved yet underrepresented movies of all time, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. For one thing, he is teaming up once again with writer Michael Bacall. And for another thing, he's also got Michael Cera co-starring. But Michael Cera is not the titular Running Man. No, instead, we have got Glenn Powell, a guy who it feels like was scientifically grown in a lab to become a big-time action movie star.
The guy has clearly had a big uprise in fame in the last couple of years, whether it be Anyone But You or Top Gun Maverick, or Chad Powers.
Basically, the guy was born to be a movie star just based on the stuff about him. He's got the looks of Brad Pitt, the insane commitment to stunt work of Tom Cruise, the charisma of Clooney, the writer instincts of Damon and Affleck, the comedy chops of a young Tom Hanks. The guy is basically built to be a leading man. So obviously, Hollywood is going to push him as far as they can to see if they can legitimately generate movie stars and not just IP up the wazoo for movie stars to work in. Even though I feel like when it comes to who Glenn Powell is and what he's working on, odds are pretty good that Marvel and DC have been in a big bidding war to see who's going to be the first studio to put this guy in a cape.
Yeah, but also a thing to talk about with this movie is the fact that it is oddly a topical instance, and not just because the movie took a movie based on a book written in the 70s, published in the 80s, and 80s that takes place in 2025.
Yeah, because this is a movie about reality TV culture and the ways that it is essentially making us kind of numb to the idea of people people having to go through weird, horrifying things, especially on game shows. Yes, we do live in a culture where that is kind of a normal thing, that if there's going to be a satire, it's basically what it's a satire about. See Hunger Games, Squid Games, just...
Basically, Stephen King predicted Mr. Beast.
I am standing on $5 million, the grand prize of the most insane competition show you've ever seen.
Welcome to the Running Man.
Yeah, suddenly it's not hard to see where we're living in a society where people are so desperate for money that they feel like they need to go on reality shows in some way to either get the money or to get the public to realize, hey, I need some money. Could you please give me some money somehow?
Capitalism. The way you have to commodify everything in order to live.
But the important thing about this movie is that, yes, it's an adaptation of a book that Stephen King basically wrote in cocaine-fueled delirium like 50 years ago. But it's also a remake of a classic Schwarzenegger movie where they're basically taking a lot of the more Schwarzenegger-y parts out. But then again, Edgar Wright's never one to make a 100% serious movie. The guy has made the Cornetto trilogy and Scott Pilgrim vs. the World and Baby Driver, and I don't know what people's general beef is with Last Night in Soho, but I still think that was a pretty good movie.
Yeah. So we're pretty excited about this one just because it's Edgar Wright. He says yet to make a bad movie in our eyes.
And I think that it's going to be interesting. From what we've heard, and a star-studded cast on top of everything else.
Yeah.
In addition to Glenn Powell, we've got the likes of Coleman Domingo, Josh Brolin, Lee Pace. Pace in a movie about running.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah, I got it when you explained it to me 2 days ago. Oh, no. William H. Macy is also in here as well.
And Sean Hayes has a little cameo in there, which if Will Arnett's movie had just come out a couple weeks earlier, then that would mean that all three of the Smartless guys had a movie coming out this November. It doesn't. His movie comes out in December, but still.
Yeah.
The important thing is that The Running Man just seems like it's going to be one of those balls to the walls, insane, over-the-top action movies, the kind that we get a lot of, but then just kind of bomb at the box office because for some reason, really good action movies like Bullet Train and Scott Pilgrim vs. the World just kind of get ignored all the time.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, and The Fall Guy.
Yeah.
Still mad about that, by the way.
But how can we not be?
But anyway, yeah. The Running Man, I don't know what else to say about it. It seems like a good movie. I hope we have a good time. The last time we walked into an Edgar Wright movie and it felt like, and we were like, it looks like a good movie. I hope we have a good time. It was like a good maybe 2 hours after we finished it when my heart stopped racing.
Yeah.
So, anyway, see you after the jump. So I think that was legitimately pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't call it a masterpiece. I wouldn't call it Edgar Wright's next big thing, but it's definitely a movie that feels like Edgar Wright had an idea of what he wanted to do with it, and he executed it to the best of his abilities.
Yeah, the thing of it is, though, it didn't really feel that much like an Edgar Wright movie.
There were moments where Edgar Wright did his usual Edgar Wright-isms, like having Glenn Powell legitimately ask the universe why as he's hanging from a giant neon Y, or anything like that.
Like, there's a little bit touches here and there, but for the most part, this feels a lot like a standard blockbuster, and that might be what is throwing a couple people off when it comes to the critical reception of this.
Yeah, it doesn't have a lot of Edgar Wright's typical frenetic editing. His use of signage to reference a character's mental state or exactly what they are pointing out. The references to movies are thrown in there, as they usually are. Deliberately throwing a movie in and then just being like, oh, that's going to be used later.
Yeah.
But let's get a little more into it. I think that a huge part of why Glenn Powell was cast in this was his multiple talents as an actor. And it gives him an ability to shine in those moments.
He is basically carrying the entire movie. He's in pretty much every scene. There's like a 0.5% of the movie that he's not in, but for the most part, he's in most of the movie. So,
and he has to carry it as much as possible, which says a lot when you consider the fact that this movie is a huge action movie that also requires him to make long political speeches about how we need to turn off the screens every once in a while because maybe the media is not telling the full story. Though, of course, there's also things like Coleman Domingo as essentially a very Tom Jones-esque version of a game show host.
Yeah, he's a very showman. He's basically the one who gets the second most amount of screen time of all the characters.
And then there's Josh Brolin playing the villainous TV producer who can manipulate anything, even not just creative editing. I'm pretty sure they wrote this script with the idea of screw AI and everything that it can supposedly do with deep fakes and everything like that.
I mean, they were writing this movie around the time that the whole actors and writers strikes were coming to an end, and they started producing this movie just a little over a year ago. So when they were shooting it, AI was really, really prevalent, and it still is prevalent now.
The bubble is going to burst eventually. We're all just kind of waiting.
Yeah.
Though one thing I will say is I kind of wish that Katie O'Brien and Martin Herlihy, as the two other runners, got a lot more screen time and a bit more backstory, just that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But mostly because I genuinely like Katie O'Brien and Martin Herlihy.
Yeah. Although Martin Herlihy is playing basically the part you expected to play.
Yeah, when you cast a comedian to play a part in a movie like this, you're pretty much expecting him to be the fodder for when they eventually have to kill someone to show that things are getting real.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Michael Cera as a psychotic doomsday prepper.
Which is both kind of Michael Cera playing to the Michael Cera type, but also kind of playing against it.
Yeah, and it works. It shockingly works. Michael Cera playing a psychotic doomsday prepper out in the boonies, living with his near-deaf, drank the Kool-Aid decades ago mother, as he's living in this fortified house with booby traps from wall to wall.
And really, I think that's the big complaint I have with this movie is I wanted to see more of all of these characters.
Yeah. Look, it's one thing when it's like the movie's called The Running Man. Let's focus on the Running Man. But there's also the fact that it almost feels like the world is just kind of informed attributes.
And I feel like I wanted to see more of these characters. These are some very interesting characters I wanted to see more of. Lee Pace as the villain, as basically the villain for most of the movie. He was interesting. I wanted to see more of him.
Yeah, it would be nice if he was a more looming and immediate threat than just kind of, he's there, he shows up a couple of times, eventually he's the final boss, but it just kind of feels like when they eventually inform you of his backstory, it's like, okay, feels a little tacked on, but, makes sense.
And then we kind of have a major character show up at the beginning of the third act for the first time, and it's like, and that's kind of...
It kind of feels like they had a whole movie of the dynamic that is set up here, but they just decided, no, this is where it's going to be. Maybe this was what the book was like.
For all we know, this is what the book was like. It would work better translated to film if they deviated from it.
But as far as we know, this is a more faithful adaptation of the books. But I don't know. I really liked some parts of it, and then other parts were just kind of weaker.
I felt like it was a little too long, too.
Well, yeah, there were moments that just kind of felt like we threw this in. Like, maybe he didn't need to meet two different anarchists and get the whole spiel of, hey, you're basically a revolutionary hero to these people.
Maybe some of these characters should have been in more than just a scene or two.
Yeah, let's cut back to the family that kept him safe for the early days of the game every once in a while, just to remind you that they're out there and stuff like that.
Or let's cut back to William H. Macy's character, who kind of sets up something, like maybe even go back a little farther and set him up better, because there's kind of a pre-story there that never...
They mention him once before he shows up, and then he actually does show up. Then they pay him off by having him just reveal the information he needs to reveal, and then we just assume he got killed off screen.
Yeah.
Which, not a bad way to go. It just feels like maybe we could have spent a little more time in the beginning of the movie setting things up. Look, I get it. We need to go. We need to set it up. We need to push through and just be like, look, the whole point of this is we need to set this whole world up. We need to understand the stakes of what the character's fighting for. But, but the first act feels like it's like 10 minutes long, and then we get into the second act almost immediately.
Yeah.
I don't know. It feels weird to be criticizing an Edgar Wright script when the guy's usually writing such tight work, especially with Michael Bacall, the guy he co-wrote one of his best movies with.
It's interesting. I mean, again, I didn't hate it, and obviously a lot of the satire it has going for it is timely and will remain timely for a little while longer.
Yeah, especially when they focus a lot on a Kardashians parody that they've included in the movie for a lot. I assumed they were going to do more with it.
I honestly, now just thinking about it more, I honestly, until you just mentioned it, didn't even think about the fact that Kardashian jokes are kind of played out at this point now.
Yeah, I mean, I can't think of a joke that would have aged better, considering the fact that as long as these people are on TV, they're always going to be the relevant reference of reality television. But I don't know what else to say. I don't even think that that's really that valid of a criticism when you consider the fact that there are other things about the movie that are good and not as good. I don't know. I didn't hate it.
No.
I did not hate it at all. I don't think it failed in what it was trying to do. It's definitely a movie that has a message, and it hammers it in as much as it possibly can, with the occasional really, really great action scene from Edgar Wright. Not quite Baby Driver levels of action and tension, but definitely the kind of thing where it's like the guy who is directing it is definitely good at what he's doing.
Yeah.
But, yeah. I think that's about it. The Running Man is solid.
Yeah.
I wouldn't call it the worst thing Edgar Wright's put his name on. Then again, I don't know what would be that, so I guess that's for a person who's watched more than all but 4 of Edgar Wright's projects to decide.
Yeah.
But that's it for right now. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to this channel. Be sure to leave in the comments what you may or may not have thought of The Running Man 2025. And don't forget to tune in next time when we're going to make you popular. Bye.